Hey everybody, it's Jim of Animateducated. And I just got back from a screening of Flow, a new animated feature film by Gints Zilbalodis. And he is from Latvia and he is amazing. His film, not only did he animate it and direct it and all that, but he composed the music. And it's really interesting because there's no dialogue whatsoever. And I don't want to spoil anything. And maybe you shouldn't even watch this right now. But this is the question and answer from the film Flow.
The audience. Matiss, I'll start with you. Talk a little bit about the challenge of making a film with no dialogue, and I understand that you had to convince some folks to be on this journey with you guys.
Well, it was both easy and difficult. It was easy in the sense that Gints had done all of his previous films without dialogue, but never on this scale, never as an international co-production, and never with a team. So the biggest challenge actually came at the writing phase. So, you know, a film with dialogue is much easier to read on paper, because here's just descriptions of actions, you know. The cat moves closer to the dog barks, the cat yawns, you know, it's stuff like that. That's how it looks on the page, honestly. So when we were applying for funding, because in Europe most films are funded by public money, by public institutions, when we were applying for these public funds, we had to make sure that they get a glimpse of the experience that is Flow by reading the script. Now, the film uses a lot of very cinematic tools like the immersive camera and the wonderful score and the very precise sound design, but that does not show up on paper. So what we did is we took a few liberties with this version of the script that we submitted for funding purposes, and we described certain things that are usually not in screenplays. So usually in screenplays you only describe what can be seen and what can be heard, but there we described a little bit the emotions of the characters in the scenes, and overall had a bit more of a prosaic approach. And that's how we were able to convince people, I think, because that gives a glimpse of the experience that this film is.
Gints, I know that you made a short film over a decade ago called Aqua. There was a cat who's afraid of water. Why did you decide to come back to that premise for the film?
I can only think, I have enough space in my head for one project. I can't think about doing two things at the same time. So I was making my first feature away, and when I finished it, I had to figure out what to do. But I didn't get an idea. And I thought, like, maybe I should revisit this premise, which worked out really well for me. And I thought, like, because this was my first film which I made with a team, I wanted to tell this story about this experience of me kind of figuring out how to work together with others. And I thought a cat would be like a great protagonist in such a story, because they're very independent and kind of do things their own way. So I kind of combined these ideas, and maybe like this short wasn't like technically the best thing I've done, but like there was something about the emotional core which really resonated with me.
Matiss made mention the immersive camera. Talk a little bit about your intention with that and how it was accomplished, which is one of the most incredible features of this film. The way that we truly feel that we're going on this journey with them.
Yeah, I wanted, like, because there's no dialogue, we can be a lot more expressive with all the other tools. Not just, like, with the music, with the sound, with the lighting, editing, and maybe most importantly with the camera. I think if we would have, like, a traditional story in the traditional, I think we would not use the cameras in such an expressive way, but I think in animation we can push it further. And I wanted to create the sense of immersion, that you are inside this world and you are experiencing everything through the cat's point of view. You almost become the cat in this journey. That's why we also don't know exactly what happened and where the people went and where the flood is coming from, because the cat doesn't know this. And I didn't want to leave the cat's point of view. But I wanted the camera to be very close to the characters instead of just like observing them from a distance. I didn't want some conventional coverage of close-ups and wide shots. I wanted each shot to be very specific to this scene. And instead of using storyboards, I would design these shots in 3D. And I do it myself because I need to go through that process of discovery where I don't know exactly what the shot will be, but I can create this environment in 3D and I can explore it with this virtual camera. And it's almost like location scouting in live action, where I can find some happy accidents, because it's we use Blender, which is a free open source software. It allows us to kind of see all the lights and even the textures while I'm doing these shots, and the way that the lights are cast, it really influences where I put the camera. It's kind of hard for me to separate the lighting and the camera. To me, they feel like the same thing. And so I wanted also to have these handheld imperfections so that it feels like it's a real person holding the camera and reacting to things. So sometimes we had to do some small adjustments to the camera after animation, which is a bit tricky in animation. You don't want to change the camera because the animators might really do everything to look right from this angle. But we needed to do some adjustments so that it feels like the camera is reacting to animation. It doesn't predict where the characters go, so sometimes it's a little bit delayed, or it's also influenced by the elements. When the flood hits the camera, it gets swept away and it struggles to kind of maintain the characters in frame. Of course, all these imperfections are there for a reason. We don't get them for free in live action, so we had to really think about that and study filmmaking.
Matiss, you work in live action. How did you find your way into animation? Was it different than your previous experience? How was it different?
Well, it's much longer. It takes much more time. And it's, to me at least, it's much less stressful because a live action movie for the 25, 30, whatever, 40 shooting days, you're completely stressed working 12 hours on sets. Whereas here, it's peaceful, but 5 years long.
And you guys have a cast of animals. How did you come to pick this collection of creatures to go on this journey?
Well, it all started with the cats, and so I had cats and dogs growing up, and these characters were inspired by them. All of these characters are kind of chosen based on the theme of the film, which is that they're looking for a place they belong or a group that accepts them. Kind of like the question of the individual versus society was this big kind of philosophical question I wanted to explore. And I wanted each of them to be kind of relatable. There's no antagonists or evil characters. And yes, maybe they are flawed and they make bad decisions, but they're not going to be evil, which makes them interesting. So I wanted each of them also to go on a journey. The cats learn something, but the other characters as well. So the dog actually learns to be more independent as opposed to the cat. And the lemur changes and the bird changes, but the only one that doesn't change is the capybara. It's peaceful hippie in this film. It's maybe this mentor in a way to others. Teaches them to kind of just to not worry about stuff and just accept everything.
And can you talk about how big the team was for this and what was sort of the division of labor between the studios?
Yeah, so this film is a co-production between 3 European countries, Latvia, France, and Belgium. And it's a particular co-production because Latvia is a very small country with a very small film industry and not a lot of animation professionals, but we were the main producers, so we had to cover the biggest part of the budget and have the biggest amount of creative positions. We actually created a studio for purposes of this film because Gints, on all of his previous projects, worked alone. And we had about maybe 5, 6 people in the studio max working at the same time, but the overall amount of people who worked on the film in all 3 countries was about 50, but not everybody at the same time, so kind of spread out. So it's a small independent production, and there's one more interesting thing about the crew. So most of the pre-production work was done in Latvia, and then the character animation was done in France. But we couldn't really afford to hire very experienced animators, so most of the people who animated this film were kids right out of film school. So recent graduates of French animation schools. They have a very large amount of, but also very good animation higher education institutions. So we worked with them, and they were extremely passionate and enthusiastic, and I hope you can see that on the screen. And then the post-production was split between France and Belgium, where the sound was done, and everything else was pretty much done in Latvia for the post-production.
Gints, I know that you taught yourself how to compose music for your first feature and continue on this one and collaborate. Talk about, creating your own music first and now sort of how to evolve for flow.
Yeah, so that's really important because I write the music while I'm writing the script, and it gives me ideas for how the story will evolve. And for example, there's this climatic scene with the cat and the bird ascending to the sky, and that was really inspired by this piece of music. Because I knew that they would be going to this place, to these towers, but I couldn't figure out what would actually happen. And when I had this piece of music, it unlocked some images in my mind and inspired me. And yeah, sometimes I feel like often also music in animated films tends to over-explain things and kind of hand-holds you all the time, and kind of it's very quickly changes from one emotion to another. But I wanted to have enough time to kind of develop these themes, so there are some cues that kind of keep developing for 5 minutes, so you can really feel more immersed in this one emotion. And maybe there's no sound effects, just the music in these places. But also there are very long scenes with no music, where there's just sound. And actually our sound designer was quite anxious about this. I thought he would be excited to have this opportunity, but no, he couldn't hide behind the dialogue. And even the music, so you're just afraid to bore people and so yeah. But the music is my favorite process probably of the whole 5-year journey, because it's so fast compared to animation. You can get results, and I think the hardest thing for me is writing the script. So when I get writer's block, I would procrastinate by making some music. So at least I have done something productive, and because music is my favorite and writing is the most difficult, so I try to balance them.
Before I pass it on to Larry, I just want to ask you about the shots that open and close the film, the cat looking at his own image in the water in the puddle, and then all the animals together looking at themselves. I think that's a beautiful sort of recognition of the individual versus the community. Talk about where that came from for you.
Well, I wanted to kind of start and end the film in a similar place, but to show that the characters have changed throughout this journey. And in the earlier versions of the script, I tried to actually have the cat return to its home. So it would kind of go on this journey and return and change, but it didn't make sense. We couldn't get it back home, it's too far away. So when I had this idea that it doesn't need to be the exact place, but just using the same image can be much stronger. And it's also important that the cat is looking at itself through water, which is very important in this film. And I knew that it was always in the script that the water is kind of trembling in the beginning. It kind of conveys the cat's anxieties and fears, and it's kind of disturbed. But when later there are others joining the cat in the reflection, the water becomes more peaceful and kind of calms down. But we use also the lemur looks at the reflections, and it's also good with these long takes when you want to have a shot and see the reaction. You would need to pan the camera, which can be very distracting. So if you have reflection, you can see it's much easier to block these scenes. You can have multiple images within a single image. It can be very useful, but it's also very tricky to make sure that with the reflections everything works, because it's really hard to make sure that it's all choreographed correctly.
Let's take some questions from the audience.
Did you draw the portrait of a cat in the home?
Yeah, I did draw that, but it was drawn. It's not actually concept art. I was just tracing a model which I'd made. With the main characters, we didn't have concept art for them. I just modeled them in 3D because that's much faster and easier for me because I'm not really good at drawing. That's why I switched to 3D because the short film is based on the cat is like a stick figure. But the other like the background characters, those were done by some concept artists, like the whale and the lemurs but yeah, that's the only concept art that I drew basically. It's a cat.
Go ahead.
What did you try to represent with the whale, and how was the safety and
the whale kind of represents the cat's fears, so we just see glimpses of it at first, and we fear the unknown. Actually, we had the real whale in an earlier version, but we were not afraid of it because we know that whales are not scary; they're very peaceful. But we needed to show feel in sync with the cat, and so we turned it into this kind of fantastical, mythical creature. But yeah, as we see it more, we become less. We fear it less, and the cat is always running away from its fears, but in the end, it kind of accepts these fears, and yeah, so it was. That last scene after the credits, it wasn't in the script. It wasn't even animated in production. We added that a month before the release. All the crew had left, and I actually just reused some animation from an earlier scene. It was a pretty spontaneous decision. I just felt that I should add something because I was just doing the credits, everything was finished, and I thought how could I make the credits more interesting? So sometimes these kind of very practical decisions have a big impact. But I know that some people leave without seeing it, and it totally changes their perception of the film. But I think it's cool to kind of give some reward to the most dedicated people to stay, or it gives them a reason to come back to see it again if they missed it in the first watch. But yeah, so that's it. Yeah.
All the way up there.
There's a famous picture from the movie Bambi where the animators, there's about 15 animators sitting around a pile of hay, and there's a deer, and they're all drawing it, making sketches of it. As a black cat owner, you've captured, I see how you captured a lot of cat mannerisms down to the pupils of the cat, and the sounds and the vocalization. Did you have a cat that you studied in time? You mentioned growing up with cats and dogs. I was wondering, how did you capture so many of the mannerisms?
Yeah, we did look at a lot of references. Of course, we couldn't actually just motion capture a cat and put it in water. It's very difficult. But so we had to hand animate everything. But we're not making a documentary. We're telling a story. So we're studying nature, but we're kind of interpreting it. And yeah. With the cats and the dogs, I think we have to be extra careful because everyone recognizes the behavior, would know if it's not exactly right. With maybe the lemur and the capybara and the bird, we have a little bit more freedom to be more expressive. But yeah, we looked at a lot of cat videos on YouTube. We had dogs sleeping on the floor of our studio, helping us, supporting us, and so we went to the zoo and. Yeah, it's cats are actually pretty hard to animate because they don't seem to follow rules. They feel like they don't have any bones. They can squash and stretch, and it's kind of it's quite tricky. But it's also very fun to animate because they are so expressive, and we can also have this cat behave in not a nice way. It can be very grumpy and mean and unkind, but we forgive it because it's so cute. So if it would be a person, I think we would not like it as much.
Go ahead.
As far as location, did you have a specific place in the world in mind, or is just as in this thing as
It's based on many different places which we kind of combined. I wanted to create this sense of adventure. Like we're going to these places for the first time. We've never seen this, and I wanted to make it feel timeless. So there's no like skyscrapers or cell phones, but it's all kind of designed to convey what the characters are feeling. So I start with the character, and then I try to figure out what kind of background can help us tell this story. I don't like make a long kind of backstory for everything. I don't kind of design the world just randomly. It's all there to kind of have like there's some like the characters have to make decisions which way to go, or they have to overcome these obstacles. So yeah, but in terms of like we looked at like Southeast Asia, we looked at Tibet and Nepal and Mayan and Aztec kind of temples and there's like Venice, but like the city, it's not kind of canals or like flooded streets. So we want to like take these ordinary places and show them in this kind of extraordinary way.
There's a question here.
Yes, knowing the mannerisms as we all do of cats and dogs. Before I ask my question, I just wanted to applaud whoever did the scene of the cats. We're underwater. And it's a death scene, supposedly a death scene, because nobody knows what that is. And that was just incredible, I have to say. When you said you weren't storyboarding, did you actually say you were hunting around and having those happy accidents? Did you actually, with that, did you actually board this thing up and know exactly where you're going, or was it more of like a straight ahead type approach, or did you actually board this thing out and say, have a reel of the story of where you were going to go? Did you build a storyboard with your explorations?
The question was about whether Gints storyboarded the story from beginning to end. Yes. Did you add all the details?
Yeah, so we didn't draw any storyboards. Everything was done with the 3D models, and I did it chronologically from the first shots. So I do the first shot, I put it in the editing timeline, and only then I start making the next one. And this kind of allows me to kind of think about transitions between the shots. And of course we had the script, but I wasn't following it strictly because we only used the script for me to kind of figure out the story and for the funding. But in production, no one had the script. And we showed everyone the animatic, which was a much kind of better way to convey my intention. So yeah, it's kind of because I worked on the script, I didn't feel precious to kind of stay very true to it. I felt like adapting it. I could like make some big changes, but I knew the ending, and this allowed me to kind of stray away from the path because I could always find my way back. But yeah, it's also like I put the music at this stage. I can edit the film using my original music. And even like the timing of the action, sometimes like the cat jumps in the water or kind of does something on the tempo of the music. So it's good to have that early. But yeah, it's I need to do this in 3D because with these long takes where the camera goes underwater and up in the air and turns 360 degrees, it's impossible to draw, I think, because the perspective changes so much and there's so much happening. So I think doing it this way, like in 3D, is the only way we can achieve this kind of long take technique.
I think that's all the time we have, but thank you, Gints. Thank you, Matiss. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that question and answer by Gints Zilbalodis. If you get a chance to see this film, it is being shown starting December 6th. At a theater near you somewhere. Try to find it. It's really worth going to see this film, and just imagining that this guy learned all this on his own. He didn't go to an animation school or a filmmaking or anything. He just did it on his own. This is his second big film. He did one called Away, and yeah, I'm attempting to get in contact with him to see if he'll come on here and talk more about his film and other things. So anyway, if you enjoyed this interview in any way, you can press that button right there to subscribe, or you can take a look at other videos and interviews I have below, or you can take a look at these two here, and we'll see you next time on Animated Educated.